Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Tickets Please. I'm your host, Josiah Wampfler. On this episode, we'll catch up with director Bong Joon-Ho's latest film, Mickey 17. 5 years after winning Best Picture for Parasite, what does the Korean director have in store for us with this Robert Pattinson-starring sci-fi adventure? Then I'll talk to the director of operations for the Wisconsin Film Festival, Ben Reiser, about this year's event taking place on April 3rd through the 10th in Madison. Finally, I'll look forward to several films on my radar this year by looking back with a list of great past films by 2025 directors. It's all ahead on this episode of Two Tickets Please. So let's get started by discussing Mickey 17. In 2020, the Academy made the surprising and rare decision to award the coolest and most deserving film that year the Oscar for Best Picture, director Bong Joon-Ho's Parasite. Both a recognition of the masterpiece Bong had created and a long overdue honor for one of cinema's greats, the win also afforded the director with a blank check for his next project. Mickey 17, a big-budget sci-fi adventure, is how he chose to cash it. While certainly no Parasite, Mickey 17 is still head and shoulders above most big-budget fare being released today. And with its satirical tone, incredible world design, and anti-capitalist themes, it is also a Bong Joon-Ho film through and through. Robert Pattinson stars as Mickey Barnes, now on his 17th life as an expendable, a disposable worker who is reprinted every time he dies. The original Mickey fled Earth with his unscrupulous friend Timo, played by Stephen Yeun, after they became indebted to a particularly psychotic gangster. Now aboard a spaceship headed to the planet Niflheim, Mickey finds himself in the service of failed politician Kenneth Marshall, played by Mark Ruffalo, who seeks to colonize the planet with his cult following, striving for purity among his flock. The situation for Mickey, constantly dying for this crazy natalist zealot, is not ideal. But a growing love affair with security agent Nasha, played by Naomi Ackie, helps to make it tolerable. After giving numerous lives, performing dangerous tasks, and being experimented on, they finally arrive on Niflheim, and Mickey's real problems begin. When Mickey 17 is left for dead on a mission, presumably to be eaten by the indigenous worm creatures, Mickey 18 is created. The issue is, Mickey 17 is still very much alive. Numerous reviews and a subpar box office performance have clearly labeled Mickey 17 as lesser Bong, and I won't entirely disagree. The film is perhaps at times too silly for its own good, it has some slight pacing issues, and not all of its myriad ideas fully come together. The ending is also surprisingly hopeful for Bong, a director known for a certain degree of cynicism, and that hope feels a bit fanciful right now. That being said, even if Mickey 17 is lower on Bong Joon-Ho's filmography, that is really only because his output has been so stellar. Mickey 17 is not shy about its themes or what it is satirizing. While your mileage may vary, one person's ham-fisted is another person's comedy, the film is intentionally blunt, as Bong often is in his films. Snowpiercer is a film where the class system is literalized as a train, and his main character ascends the wealth ladder as he moves to the front. Parasite, while more self-serious in tone, has a similar metaphor at its heart, rendered vertically instead of horizontally. Following in the lineage of Tilda Swinton's Minister Mason from Snowpiercer, who is clearly styled after Margaret Thatcher, Mark Ruffalo's Marshall has been widely compared to Donald Trump. And while there are clear stylistic similarities and purposeful allusions, such as his supporters wearing red hats, like how Swinton drew influence from Gaddafi, Hitler, and Berlusconi, Ruffalo's performance also has further layers. These include his fanatical obsession with natalism, his wife's strange sauce fetish, his insanely white veneers, and the cultish church behind him that they constantly refer to as the Company. All of these details both point to various inspirations and inform different themes within Bong's film. As for Mickey's story, the Expendables program is a clear manifestation of the violence inherent in the class structure, and the logical endpoint of allowing corporations to trample over worker rights. But what Bong does with the multiples plotline brings in additionally fascinating elements, both thematically and in regard to Pattinson's performance. I'm not exaggerating when I say that Robert Pattinson deserves an Oscar nomination for his embodiment of the divergent personalities of the two Mickeys. For 17, he portrays a nebbish, far more docile man who has resigned himself to his fates. In short, he's kind of a loser. But with 18, a switch has flipped. Hard-nosed and commanding far more confidence, he's borderline psychotic and has embraced the abyss he's grown accustomed to as a reason to rebel. Pattinson does not just rely on their actions to differentiate between 17 and 18, but adjusts his vocal performance and even posture to tell us more about who these disparate characters are. It is all incredibly impressive. Bong also literalizes the dynamics between workers, both in his rendering of these multiples and in how the Mickeys are treated differently by fellow workers. Mickey 17, while clearly aware of the ways he is being exploited, has largely resigned himself to the system he exists in. Too squeamish to try to change his material conditions, he keeps his head down and follows the rules. But 18 has become radicalized. He is tired of his exploitation and is willing to take extreme action to attempt to change his lot in life. Not only does this represent the progression of class consciousness, but the conflict between the Mickeys shows the difficulties of organizing collective action. This is exacerbated by further alienation the Mickeys experience from their fellow workers. Similar to undocumented workers in America, the Mickeys face deeper exploitation, and the outlawing of multiples, with the penalty being placed on the worker, is used to break the class consciousness that develops when expendables are able to organize together. Bong adds to this a deeply anti-colonial narrative when Marshall and his crew arrive on Niflheim and discover an indigenous population of worm creatures they immediately believe to be threatening. Ignorantly labeled creepers, the creature design and VFX work here is tremendous. They are the perfect mix of adorable and terrifying, hinting at a deeper complexity than brutes like Marshall are willing to entertain. As with any authoritarian, force is the only language they know, and the violent means they use to solve internal disputes always turns outward. Marshall, instead of choosing communication, chooses ethnic cleansing. Ultimately, Mickey and the other workers see how they have more in common with the indigenous creepers of Niflheim than these thugs that seek to destroy and control them, and Mickey 17 becomes a fight against their shared enemy. Bong even references one of the greatest films about anti-colonial struggles, The Battle of Algiers, with the high-pitched scream the creepers make, echoing the resistance cry of the Algerians against their French oppressors. The genius of Bong Joon-Ho, and why I have such adoration for him, is that he constantly manages to deliver such thought-provoking movies that also happen to be hilarious and entertaining. Mickey 17 is yet another example. I'm giving Mickey 17 4 out of 5 stars. It is currently playing at your local theater. All right, I'm here with Director of Operations for the Wisconsin Film Festival, Ben Reiser. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josiah. It's great to be here. What is this, the third or fourth time I've done this with you?
Yeah, so it's kind of become a bit of a tradition. Every year we seem to do this since I've been starting the show, and really enjoy talking to you, really enjoy previewing the festival with you. So this year's edition will run from April 3rd to the 10th in venues all across Madison. Those venues include places on the UW campus like the Chazen, the Cinematheque, the Music Hall, and Marquee at Union South, as well as theaters throughout the city like the Bartell, the Barrymore, and of course Flick's Brewhouse. So I guess the first thing I just want to talk about is the venues. So unlike last year, there aren't any major changes to the venues, which I'm sure has been quite a relief since you didn't have to work out new agreements. So going into the second year with this configuration, were there any adjustments that needed to be made? And how was the overall reception last year to this version of the festival.
Yeah, thanks. Last year went really well, I would say. We were a little worried about the move to Flicks and the move to sort of the east side of Madison, but we had great attendance at Flicks, and getting back into the Bartell Theater for the first time in probably 10 years or more was great. And getting back into the Barrymore for the first time since I think 2017 was also a lot of fun. And then also getting into music hall on campus and showing movies
Yeah.
for maybe the first time ever. I have not come across anybody or read anywhere that any movies had ever been shown there. So that went really well. The one thing that has changed from last year to this year, and the one thing we decided to do differently, was to not extend our time at the Barrymore to be there for the full 8 days of the festival like we were last year. This year, we're doing the first 4 days of the festival. It's really the tale of two festivals this year. There's
Yep.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at all of our campus venues and the Bartell and the Barrymore. And then everything shuts down at the end of the day on Sunday. And we move everything over to Flick's Brewhouse. I keep saying that, but that's not true. We have one sort
Yeah.
of lone screening in the middle of the week at the Cinematheque. The Bloody Lady, which is I think a Czechoslovakian cartoon, and it's or animated film, I should say, but we're doing it with live musical accompaniment by Claire
Oh yeah.
Rousset, who's a sort of a well-known experimental musical artist. So that's the one exception to the rule, but basically it's 4 days of campus and downtown in Barrymore, and then 4 days at Flicks, where we don't have to run around. We don't need as many volunteers. We're not trying to keep 7 venues up and running at the same time. It was great having the Barrymore for all 8 days last year, especially given the fact that we had Alexander Payne on the last night of the festival showing Sideways to a packed crowd. That was great, but we didn't really have an event like that for the last night of the festival this year. And so for that reason, and the other reason is the projector one of the 3 projectors that was donated to us by AMC Hilldale a few years ago that we moved into the Barrymore, that stopped working
Oh.
after this last year's festival. And we kept thinking we were going to be able to get it fixed, but a couple months ago we made the call that, like, you know what, better to use this one for parts for the other 2 that are still in operation over at the Bartell and at Music Hall. So we took it out of the booth and we're renting a digital projector for Barrymore, which is what we always used to do at Barrymore and at Shannon Hall.
Yep.
So we're back to doing that, and it's cheaper to rent that stuff for 4 days instead of 8 days. And so
Yeah.
there we are. So yes,
Nice.
you're right. It's almost the same festival footprint, but just a little bit smaller, a little less stuff going on at the Barrymore.
And then, I guess, speaking of the Barrymore, opening night is at the Barrymore on Madison's Near East Side, and will feature the Tim Robinson, Paul Rudd comedy Friendship. I've seen a little bit about this, but if you can kind of tell us about the film, and then since it looks to be sold out, this would be a good opportunity to talk about how rush tickets work.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could tell you more about the film other than but I've probably seen about as much of it as you have. I've seen the coming attraction. I saw the coming attraction a couple months ago on YouTube, and was talking to Mike King a little bit later on. Mike King is our artistic director and the guy in charge of figuring out what it is we're showing on opening night. And I said to him, hey, I just saw this coming attraction for this movie called Friendship. That would be super cool if we could get it for opening night. And he said, yeah, I'm already working on it. So great minds think alike. But I think we were both surprised that A24 said, yeah, sure, go ahead, show it opening night. So there we are. So that's opening night, and I'm as excited to see it as anybody. It looks hilarious. And that brings us to rush tickets. So it's true, we've sold out of advanced tickets or advanced ticket. I don't know why I always correct people when they say advance, and there I was saying it. We've sold out of advanced tickets for Friendship, and actually maybe 7 or 8 other screenings at this point.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean we won't have tickets the night of the screening or the days of the screening. And what you can do if you want to see the movie, show up, earlier than you normally would at the venue. In this case, the Barrymore on Thursday night. Maybe show up. The movie starts at 7:30, so maybe 6 or 6:30, and get into what we call the rush line. And these are people who don't have tickets but are hoping some seats will open up by the time the movie starts to screen. And because there's always people who buy tickets for films and don't wind up going. They get sick, or they get called out of town or something else, or towards the end of the festival they realize they've bought tickets for 20 movies and they got burnt out on the whole thing after 15 movies. So there's always some empty seats, even for sold out films. And then with about 10 minutes before screening time, we will then go ahead and resell those empty seats that we still have in the house to people waiting in the rush line. So we have a pretty good track record of that working out for most of, if not all, the people who are waiting in the rush line. I will say, on the other hand, Friendship sold out faster than any film I've ever seen sell out
Yeah.
at a large venue for our festival. I mean, it's crazy. That's an 800 seat theater. And I've never seen anything sell out there in less than 3 weeks or a month, for the festival. But this thing was gone literally within an hour of tickets going on sale.
Yeah.
On opening day of ticket sales. So I do think there's a lot of demand. I think the people who have tickets sort of know that they have a hot commodity in their hands. I would still bet money that there will be some seats to be sold on opening night.
Yeah.
And then for the other films that are also sold out of advance tickets, I think there's an even better chance of a bunch of seats still being available at showtime.
Yeah. I know, in the past, I've myself switched out tickets last minute. I wanted to go see something else or whatever. So yeah, there's always a chance that you might be able to get into some of these. So one of the things I love about the festival is just the variety, how many films are programmed that are just completely off my radar, even as a pretty obsessive cinephile. So I just wanted to ask, what are 5 films or short film blocks that you would recommend people make time for this festival?
Yeah, that's a great question. This year, to my eyes, looking at the schedule, it feels like we've got a bunch of screenings of films that are hard to see, or versions of which are hard to see, almost impossible to see. I know that we've got this Rolling Stones documentary concert film. I don't even know if I can say the name of it on this medium, but it's by this documentary filmmaker Robert Frank, and it's from the early 70s. And it was made, and then the Stones refused to let it be released, and so it's only ever been seen kind of unofficially at sort of underground screenings, bootleg copies of it on tape, and the occasional festival screening. And I know that Mike King has been working for years to get this film shown, and we have it, and we were allowed to program it at the Barrymore. So this is maybe your one and only chance to see a legitimate copy of this Rolling Stones documentary that I won't say the name of here, but you can
Yeah,
check it out in our film
we'll
group.
just say Sea Sucker Blues.
Seasucker Blues, perfect.
Yeah.
We've also got something that I didn't know was a thing until maybe last year. We have the original Meet the Parents. And when you say
Mm.
that, you think, oh, yeah, I've seen it with Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro. But no, the original Meet the Parents was made by this guy, Greg Gliana. It's a black and white indie comedy. The people who eventually made Meet the Parents with Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro saw this film before it was released and said, we want to make this film. We want to make it as a major studio film. And I don't exactly know what the arrangement that they made with Greg was, but they basically bought the film from him and said, we're gonna here's a bunch of money. We're gonna bury this film. We're gonna remake it as a mainstream major studio comedy with Ben Stiller and Robert De Niro, and they made it. And then in recent years, apparently this whole concept of it being, buried has loosened up. And I don't know if the rights to screen it reverted back to Greg, or I don't really know. We'll find out when we show it because he's going to be in attendance and we'll talk about it. But
Okay.
we are showing the original indie black and white, apparently much darker, and I hear even funnier. I know I think Meet the Parents is a pretty funny movie, but apparently this one's even better. So I'm really psyched
Nice.
about that. We also have the U.S. premiere of a British film from the 80s that sort of takes place in the sort of punk rock new wave scene in the UK. It's called Breaking Glass,
Okay.
a movie that was released here in the United States, but when it came to the United States, they cut the whole last 15 minutes of the film, and basically the whole sort of like the thing the film is building to has never been seen in the US.
Hmm.
And this guy Jonathan Hertzberg, who has a sort of a boutique Blu-ray DVD label called Fun City Editions, has gotten the rights to it. It's a pretty good sort of drama, again, about sort of a band with a female lead singer and their sort of ups and downs and her sort of nervous breakdown that she has with success. So this is your first time in the US to be able to see this in a theater as it
Okay.
was originally intended. And then we've also got a couple of 35 millimeter prints of films. And it's always great to be able to show films on film.
Yeah.
And it's something we do throughout the year at Cinematheque. And it's something that we are doing at this year's festival. First off, we've got a 35 millimeter archival print, which means a print that really hasn't been shown a lot, is sort of like kept as like a safety copy, and it's sort of like, in a vault. But we're pulling it out of the vault of Paul Verhoeven's sort of subversive masterpiece, Starship Troopers.
Yep.
And so it's going to be great to see Starship Troopers on 35. We also have the producer of the film, John Davison, who's coming to do a Q&A, and the screenwriter of the film, Ed Neumeyer, who also wrote Verhoeven's other masterpiece, RoboCop. So the guy who wrote RoboCop and Starship Troopers is going to be in the room with us watching a 35 millimeter print of Starship Troopers and then spilling the beans on how he came to write it and all kinds of other cool stuff. And then
Nice.
we've also got a 35 millimeter print of Tim Hunter's film adaptation of the S.E. Hinton novel Tex with Matt Dillon.
Mm.
Uh, Tim Hunter is an amazing director. He directed River's Edge, which
Yep.
everybody loves. Keanu Reeves at his best, and
Yep.
Dennis Hopper and Crispin Glover. And he's in recent years done a lot of really great work on TV. He directed a bunch of episodes of that show Hannibal.
Mm.
So Tim, who's been with us before and is also a terrific cinephile, and he has his own collection of 35 millimeter prints, including a beautiful Technicolor print, original release print of Vertigo that we showed at the festival 5 or 6 years ago. So he's been to the festival before, but this year he's coming back and he's going to show a 35 millimeter print of his film Tex. So those are 5, and believe me, I could give you another 15 that are sort of just as exciting, if not more so. But those were the first 5 that came to mind just now.
So I just wanted to look back as well at the past festivals, because Wisconsin Film Festival has kind of consistently become a place where I find films that just eventually make it on my top 20 films of the year. So in 2022, that was A Night of Knowing Nothing. In 2023, that was How to Blow Up a Pipeline and Blue Jean. And then last year, it was Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World and Green Border. So just looking back at past festivals, are there any favorite films that come to mind that you experienced because of the Wisconsin Film Festival?
Well, How to Blow Up the Pipeline was also one of my favorites, although in fairness, I saw it in the previous fall at the Chicago International Film Festival and came back and raved about it and said, we've got to
Yep.
get this thing and show it. And then we did. And it was a great screening that we had. But Hundreds of Beavers, which we showed 2 or
Mm.
3 years ago, and before it became the massive, I don't even want to say cult hit, it's just like this phenomenon. But we were there at the beginning with Hundreds of Beavers, and we programmed it at Shannon Hall, which was kind of a risk because a black and white silent comedy about beavers and an Applejack entrepreneur is maybe not something you might think would fill Shannon Hall, but we did. And it was a crazy great screening that I'll never forget, including me introducing the film in a beaver costume. And then the guys from the movie there running up and down on stage during the movie, doing like a whole Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of thing. So that was terrific. I remember seeing Oz Perkins' first film, The Black Coat's Daughter, for the
Ooh,
first time at the festival and was absolutely blown away by it. I thought it was a terrific thriller. And I remember watching it in 4070 Vilas Hall with the sound really cranked. And I think I was sitting in the front row and I was just like, whoa, this blew my mind. Um, and then the same thing really for Coraline Forget, who's had a huge year this year with
mm.
what's the name of that movie?
The Substance.
The Substance, yeah.
Yeah.
With The Substance, we showed her first film, I want to say 2018, maybe more
Yeah.
recently. 2018, Revenge,
Yep.
which I loved so much. I watched it twice that year. We showed it twice at the festival. I still think it's a much better film than The Substance, which is also a fine film. But
Mm.
if you're going to make me
We
pick
share
one,
that opinion.
yeah. Yeah, that was I would say those are what immediately comes to mind with memorable screenings at the festival.
Nice. Well, that'll wrap up our discussion. So I just want to remind folks that this year's fest will run from April 3rd through the 10th in Madison, Wisconsin. You can go to wifilmfest.org to view the schedule and get tickets. There have been numerous films that have already sold out this year again, so make sure to plan ahead and get your tickets soon. Ben, thank you so much again for the wonderful discussion and all your work putting together the festival this year. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, always a pleasure. Let's do it again next year.
Finally past the delays caused by the 2023 Hollywood strikes and filled with projects from renowned directors, 2025 is shaping up to be an excellent year for cinema. So I thought now would be a great time to set the stage for the year to come by talking about a handful of great films from directors releasing this year and detail their upcoming projects. Scottish director Lynne Ramsay is one of modern cinema's largely unheralded masters, and 2025 might finally be her year to get her due. Her latest, Die My Love, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, is set for a premiere at the Cannes Film Festival and follows a woman driven to the brink of insanity by marriage and motherhood. Ramsay often deals with characters driven mad by both the violence of the world around them and the pain within them. With a naturalistic and empathetic lens, she's often more interested in the aftermath of violence than the act itself. Whether that be a young woman finding her way in the world after the sudden suicide of her partner in Morvern Collar, a mother, played by Tilda Swinton, facing the repercussions of her son's deadly actions in We Need to Talk About Kevin, or, in my pick for today, a traumatized hitman whose life is turned upside down when he rescues a girl from a politically connected sex trafficking ring in 2017's You Were Never Really Here. While a content warning is warranted, Ramsay is not interested in showing the graphic details of such a depraved world, or even much of the Taken-style violence that Joaquin Phoenix's Joe inflicts on those responsible. In fact, one of the most gripping scenes of the film, in which a hammer-wielding Joe rescues a young girl from her captors, is relayed almost entirely through black and white CCTV footage, showing little of the actual hammering. In You Were Never Really Here, Ramsay is once again more interested in the aftermath than the act. We see this in how Joe's traumatic past is presented in fleeting flashbacks, the details blurry, but the effects clear. We see it in how she focuses more on Joe's care for his aging mother than the violent work he does outside the house. The film does not shy away from the obvious connections between its trafficking ring and the real-life operation run by Jeffrey Epstein, but the political conspiracy at its heart remains as opaque as our understanding of that true story. At its core, You Were Never Really Here is a film about the corrosive nature of violence. Its frames may exclude the actions at times, but Ramsay shows the brutal toll it all takes on the human soul. Whether necessary or not, violence eats away at our humanity. Coupled with Ramsey's previous film, We Need to Talk About Kevin, the broader message of her work is clear. America has a problem with mass violence, and it is literally destroying the souls of our citizens and the country itself. Later this year, director Kelly Reichardt will release The Mastermind, an art heist film set against the backdrop of the Vietnam War and the era's burgeoning social movements. A director known for contemplative films told through a neo-realist lens, Reichardt has consistently put out incredibly moving and thoughtful films over her career. For this list, I'll recommend another John Magaro starring turn, possibly the best performance of his career, 2019's First Cow. Set in the 1820s amid westward expansion in the Pacific Northwest, First Cow follows Cookie, a traveling cook who dreams of opening a bakery, and his nascent friendship with the industrious King Lu, a Chinese immigrant seeking his fortune. But as Lu says, they lack the capital to realize their dream of a San Francisco bakery. So when a wealthy landowner imports the first dairy cow into the region, they see an opportunity and decide to steal its milk to fund their future endeavor. Reichardt uses the natural beauty of the landscape, flooded with the changing colors of autumn, to keep this proto-heist at an even keel. Through brilliant cinematography and sound design, First Cow becomes a profoundly immersive experience. Her sharp, highly saturated images bring out the deep colors of the forest to the point that you can nearly smell the fresh nature in front of you. And the sounds of the wind rustling through the trees or the river quietly babbling in the distance recall the peaceful feeling of the forest air upon your skin. With patient, deliberate pacing that allows us to soak up the simple conversations between these new friends, Reichardt allows her audience to contemplate the deeper themes running through this work, like the comforts of male friendship, man's exploitation of the natural world, the emerging capitalist engine in the frontier, how that engine drove westward expansion, and even the power food holds in our lives. Plus, Reichardt also shows an impressive attention to historical detail, which deepens these themes and makes her film look wholly unique. The performances are brilliant across the board in First Cow, with John Magaro and Orion Lee giving standout turns. Magaro will once again return to Reichardt's troupe in her 2025 film The Mastermind, joined by my favorite performer of last year, Josh O'Connor, as well as Alana Haim, Bill Camp, and Abby Hoffman. The cast, along with its art heist premise, has made the film one of my most anticipated of the year. Kogonada is already one of my top 20 working directors, and he's only released 2 films, with his third feature, A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, on the way this fall. His 2021 film, After Yang, made my top 10 list for that year, and my pick for today, 2017's Columbus, is one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. Gorgeously constructed, Columbus is all the more impressive considering that Kogonada had barely set foot on a film set before helming this debut. Set in Columbus, Indiana, the film follows Casey, a longtime resident of the town played by Haley Lou Richardson, as she struggles with whether to leave town to pursue her passion for architecture. She meets Jin, played by John Cho, the Korean son of a famous architecture scholar, who is in town after his father fell into a coma. Growing up in the shadow of his father's career, Jin holds a jaded view of architecture. But as the pair tour the city's renowned buildings together, Jin begins to reckon with his relationship with his father and deal with his grief, while Casey slowly starts to let go of her fears of leaving town and gains the confidence to pursue her passion. Featuring little camera movement, Columbus is heavily inspired by the films of Japanese director Yasujiro Ozu. Known for his long lockdown shots and unconventional editing, Kogonada employs those techniques here, often letting his scenes develop in just a few beautifully composed shots and eschewing the shot-reverse shot editing normally seen in Conversations. But Kogonada also brings his own flavor, showing an impressive talent for blocking his actors and a keen eye for composition that lends his frames deeper meaning. In Columbus, he is aided by the exquisite and unique architecture of the city, but he also knows how to amplify that beauty, and is often able to turn a mundane scene say of two people talking in a hotel room, into something truly extraordinary. Columbus also features magnificent performances all around. John Cho is perfectly suited for Jin, playing his internal struggles so subtly that when his emotions truly come to the surface, it hits you like a brick. It's truly the best performance I've ever seen from him. This is also the first film I ever saw Haley Lu Richardson in, and I fell in love with her here. She wears her emotions on her sleeve much more than Jin, and the way she talks about her connection to her favorite buildings in the city makes me tear up every time. And Parker Posey, though a small role in the film, is an absolute scene stealer, playing her character's odd dynamic with Jin perfectly. Combined with an intelligent and heartfelt screenplay, Columbus is not only a deeply moving film, but one that gives you a ton to think about. While we know very little about Kogonada's next film, A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey, I expect his visual style and thoughtfulness to shine through. Plus, with a cast featuring Margot Robbie, Colin Farrell, Jodie Turner-Smith, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Billy Magnuson, Sarah Gadon, and Hamish Linklater, we are surely in for some wonderful performances. I could go on endlessly about all the other directors I am most excited for this year, but we simply do not have the time. So I'll wrap up by briefly listing some other films to keep an eye out for. First, we have the return of another Korean master, Park Chan-wook. His 2025 film, No Other Choice, stars Squid Game actor Lee Byung-hun as a perpetually unemployed man who grows desperate and hatches a plan. He's going to start eliminating his competition. Director Park has a litany of amazing films, including Old Boy, Decision to Leave, and Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, among others. But I would recommend 2016's The Handmaiden as a good starting point. Musician-turned-director Boots Riley also returns this year with his sophomore feature, I Love Boosters. Starring Keke Palmer and Mickey 17 star Naomi Ackie, the film will tell the story of a ring of shoplifters who take aim at a cutthroat fashion maven. Riley's 2017 debut, Sorry to Bother You, starring Lakeith Stanfield and Tessa Thompson, was my favorite film of that year, and perfectly introduces you to Riley's frenetic, satirical style and fiery socialist politics. Finally, this year will also mark the return of Chloe Zhao, 4 years after winning Best Director and Picture for Nomadland at the Oscars. Her latest, Hamnet, will star Jessie Buckley as Agnes Shakespeare, the wife of the famous bard, and detail her and her husband's struggles following the death of their only son. Paul Mescal will also star as William Shakespeare. As you know, Nomadland was one of my favorite films the year it came out, but I will also recommend Zhao's other films, Songs My Brother Taught Me, and the criminally underseen 2017 masterpiece, The Writer. That'll do it for this episode of 2 Tickets Please. If you would like more written content from me, you can head over to my Substack and check out my far too early 2026 Oscar predictions. Just go to 2ticketsplease.substack.com. Thanks for watching.